Okay,
Mm,
so hey Devin, how are you? How are you doing, bro?
yeah, we are doing good actually.
Okay, that's great.
Hello.
Devin, am I audible? Yeah, yeah.
Mm, Devin, can
Am I
you
audible
hear?
to Devin?
Hello.
I can hear.
Okay.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, we can
So
start.
yeah, so okay, we can start right now. So David, introduce yourself first of all.
First of all, okay, my name is Devin Gray. Been a software engineer for the past 10 years. Currently, I am on the CMS team with PayPal, building out components for these guys. So, anything else you need to know from me? Or
Um, okay. Hello, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
um,
Am I audible?
we can,
Okay, am I audible?
okay.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, so I was telling, tell us about your journey, like how do you started and how you got a job in PayPal as a software engineer.
Okay. So you put the question how I got started as an engineer and how I got started at PayPal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, how I got started as an engineer actually was this is a web engineer. It was kind of by accident. I wanted to do game design, but then at the last second decided against it, and I thought there'd be another computer opportunity with growth. And the college recruiter at the time said you should try this program here that we offer, and you could do web design. And I was like, what is that? They and MySpace was kind of popping at the time. They're like, it's like editing your MySpace, but for a living. You try to use code to like change how stuff looks on the web, and I'm like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. And that's my first real introduction to what web design even was. And after a year, I took my first coding class because that's how long it took before I got to the coding part, and I just fell in love with it. And after that, I dropped out and started teaching myself how to code. And I did that for, I on and off for a bit because coding is a hard profession. I was did kind of taught myself for the next 3 years, and then I got my first coding job, and I kept working in different agencies for a couple of years
Okay,
up until the pandemic hit, and then that's when I started working for PayPal.
okay, that's great.
Okay.
That was really great. Means, yeah. I also heard that like you were doing some courses before getting a job in PayPal, like from Clever Programmer, right?
Yes, I took a number of courses. The last course I took before the PayPal job was Clever Programmer. Yes.
Oh, that's really
Okay. So,
cool. So like tell us
I
about your like a bit about yeah, yeah, then we continue.
no, no, you can go on.
Okay. So basically like tell us about your bit about your journey, like how do you got a like really you got a job, like you have done the course of from Clever Programmer and you got a job in PayPal as software engineer. It is an like really a big opportunity. So tell us about yourself like that. Like your experience of getting your first job.
The experience of getting my first job.
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So, my first job, well, the first job is always the hardest. Like anybody, especially if you're self-taught. And at the time, it wasn't as popular to hire people without a degree as it is now. So the first job was actually kind of difficult to get. I did some work for free for some different companies, and I actually, to help me myself get work, I actually started an LLC. So I presented myself less as like some guy looking for work and as a business, as a professional freelancer. Like I do this for a living, and that is what helped me get my first couple of jobs, shifting that mindset from, oh, I'm looking for work to I am a professional. I do this for a living. I already have projects. And that was what helped me to catapult me into a lot of different jobs. And I feel like that's something that Clever Programmer also helped to kind of solidify as far as once I got to their program and saw the stuff that they were teaching, teaching that independence as far as how to present yourself and how to really treat your craft professionally, even if you are just a beginner.
Okay. So from how long time you are working in for PayPal?
I started in December, so it just been about 6 months.
Okay.
That's
So
great.
you got introduction to coding at college, or you are a full self-taught developer?
My first introduction to coding was at college. It was a basic HTML and CSS class. Uh, I did nothing really but play around in Dreamweaver, so I wouldn't call that necessarily coding, but that was my first exposure to like what you could actually do to create things on the web.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So as you said, like you were interested in game design first. So now what you're thinking about? Like which field you are working for PayPal, or like what things you're working in PayPal? What are you doing? Actually, what are you doing in PayPal? Like what things you're working on?
Your designation from.
Okay. So PayPal currently, like I said, I'm on the CMS team. So we work with the marketing side of things, content management, the blogs, any pages that they run in advertisements and things like that, handling different languages. So as far as the tech that's used, we are using React. Either 16 or 17 across all of the site right now. So we're working on upgrading that and creating all of our pages in React on the front end. On the back end is a combination of things, but right now we're in the process of migrating everything to Next.js. We have a couple of different node frameworks that we've been sunsetting. In different languages, but we're trying to migrate everything to pure Node or custom uh, with Kraken JS, an Express framework we've been using, or we're using Next.js as a tester to kind of roll out to kind of test some of the different content side of things that we're doing as far as displaying all of our content in the different languages and to help with our caching and try to get all of our page load times as quickly as possible, especially in outside of the US. We're trying to get a bigger market.
Mhm.
Okay.
So you're working as a full stack developer or a front end back end?
So I started as full stack in the beginning, just, when you're onboarding, kind of stick you with what you're good at. And now I'm moving more into the full stack side of things where it's not just coding. Now it's, understanding how the Webpack side of things works in the build process and how things get built for production. And then it's how a little bit in the back end as far as how the caching works, how we cache all this content once it's already built in production. And then when you work on the caching, then you start learning more things as far as like how to have the requests and the APIs on the front end side, and then on the back end side, how the APIs are sent. So it's not just a front end role, it's more of a full stack role, but they do kind of start you off in usually one spot in the beginning, and then you slowly move around and get a full picture of like the entire workflow process, front to back.
Yeah, I have just
Okay,
one
that
question.
was
Like,
like that is
how
really great.
important? Yeah, how important are data structures and algorithms in your, at your position or at your designation as a full stack developer?
Okay, data structures and algorithms. It is important. Uh, Again, most jobs when they test, you will not be using data structures and algorithms every day. That much is true. It is, however, a test of your critical thinking ability, which is being tested every day on the job. As far as specific data structures and algorithms, you'll find plenty of places where, you know, we're using linked lists for something here, or we need to, handle nested arrays a certain way. And as far as my interview, it wasn't necessarily data structure heavy, but it was algorithm heavy with things that they have had to previously solve on the job. So it's more so important to really understand um, the thought process behind solving a given problem that you haven't come across before. And that's what's the most helpful on the job, is understanding how to think on the fly and work with different things. And that's what helps you work across the different stacks, as far as front end, back end, as far as the different parts of the site, being able to understand how different code works, and how it all connects together.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that's
is it
great.
necessary
That's
for a
really
web
great.
developer to know data structures and algorithms for web developer?
Is it important for a new
Hello.
developer?
Yeah, no. Is it necessary algorithms or data structure for web developer? Are they necessary?
Okay. For a new developer, I will say no. I didn't come across any in the beginning, first starting out as a developer, as an engineer. But I will say the further along you go, the higher up you want to be in your job, in your company, in your field, they become more and more important. You cannot ignore them. One, because companies will not stop testing for them. It is probably the most efficient way they can find, as far as, good developers. And I have a colleague that just interviewed, for Netflix. Of course, they tested him on algorithms, and that was what helped him, to pass that interview. But also, it's just a matter of really understanding your critical thinking, how much you understand a specific language. It's how well you can think outside of typical coding practices. And when you get to these bigger companies and you start working with, billions, millions, and billions of users and millions and billions of data sets, um, every second counts. So it's much more important to be, that much more efficient, and algorithms help with that. So I say it's very important the higher up you want to go. You definitely can't learn them all at once. It's not the easiest thing to learn. It's not the most fun thing to learn necessarily, but if you just start early as you're learning, just, when you learn the language, learn some basic algorithms and kind of keep building on top of it as you learn more and more things, it becomes much easier, and you'll be much better off for it in the long run.
Okay, that was like really great. So means we can like know that like data structures and algorithms are really important over here, like to get a job in any
Right.
IIT company or any fine company, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Devin, like, have you been a part of any interview process lately? Like, how was it different from your first one? Like, Have you had an like interview in PayPal? So how was your experience of that interview process?
So that interview process was feels so long ago now. It was a little kind of your typical developer interview process where in the beginning, you do talk a little bit, with your interviewer. You talk about your experience, kind of like how we're doing here. And you really try to get a feel for you as an individual, and then you get a at least for PayPal, I got a basic technical assessment where I had to solve. I don't remember the algorithm now, but it was your typical algorithm: solve something involving a loop. You know, use object manipulate object data a certain way, things like that, just to make sure that I'm basically not lying on my resume. And then once you pass that initial kind of feeler interview, I got a second interview, which was more technical, and that interview was about, how do you solve this more difficult problem with loops? How do you solve with nested arrays? How do you handle, destructuring? Do you know how to do this with ES6 syntax versus ES5? Really kind of testing, how you would code necessarily on the job, as well as how quickly, and if you can't solve, at least understanding your thought process so that they can determine, okay, he doesn't know this, but he's halfway there, or okay, he can solve this normally, or if he got stuck on a problem, he'd be able to easily ask for help. And that's kind of all that they're gauging in these interviews, especially the technical part, how well you both code and communicate what you're trying to do, so that if you do get stuck, you can easily get unstuck with help from another developer. So those were the two technicals, and then after that, it was just a third with my manager, who was awesome. I actually met him in person recently, so but you get that third interview just with the manager, just to really get a feel for where you fit and make sure it's more of a culture fit as far as how you fit in with the PayPal team. So that was my most recent interview, and the interviews definitely vary depending on uh, how senior you are in the company, because like that was completely different from like my first interview for my first job.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. So can
Yeah,
you
I
please
had
tell
this
about
one
your like
question. Like
resume tips? Like
now,
okay, okay,
Um,
Darshan, go ahead. Yeah, I'll take the next.
okay. Okay. So basically, I was telling about like Devin, like there is like some resume tips like about to our audience, like what resume tips you can give. Like there is also some resume, right? If you give resume to paper or any type of company, so they will hire you. They will first see your resume, like what's your about resume, like how's your resume, what skills do you have. So do you have any tips for that to our audience?
Resume tips. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say um, first, my resume tips for someone trying to break into the field are different from resume tips for someone who is just trying to land a better job. So, in the beginning, it's super important to have projects. You're going to be leaning much more heavily on your portfolio, on your existing skills. You don't want to come off as a new developer, but you want to show that you're an experienced developer first who just happens to not have gotten a job. So your portfolio is going to be real world projects that someone can see, like, oh, we actually need that. Oh, we actually build this for clients. And it could be a smaller scale version of something that you would build for someone else, but they need to see that that the skill level is there. And so I would say, make sure you have, something a little bit more advanced than a to-do app. Make sure it's, even if it is, a basic CRUD functionality, repurpose it into something that can actually be used, and so that whoever is looking at your resume, the HR person, the tech lead, can see, oh, this person has potential, and focus more on what you know versus what you don't. Don't try to be like, oh, I know this language a little bit, kinda, because I'm just learning it in Free Code Camper or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Focus
yeah.
on one thing and know it really, really well. Have a deep level knowledge of it. If it's JavaScript, really understand JavaScript, understand new JavaScript, understand how the event system works, how it does, as far as how it handles. Oh, sorry, the event loop. I'm like, it's really early in the morning. Sorry, I couldn't think of that. But really understand how things work, how it handles variables, things like that. And that deep level knowledge is much easier to transfer into a language you don't know, or much easier to transfer into a framework you don't know, which
Yeah.
also lends to my point in pick one framework and learn it well versus trying to learn all the frameworks at a shallow level. Pick what is best in your area and focus on knowing that and testing that. And then, because whatever they need you to learn, they know they can teach you versus, oh, you kind of know, but you kind of also don't know anything. So we really just have to teach you from scratch anyway. So as far as a beginner, that's what I would focus on, having deep knowledge in a specific set of things so that you can get your foot in the door and then use that job to fill your knowledge gaps elsewhere. Um, and then once you get that experience under your belt, that's what's really important into getting some of these higher level jobs, especially without a degree. Um, that once you hit that certain threshold for experience and you've done enough things that you can only really get exposed to on the job, you can only really get exposed to how to handle, you know, how to handle clients. You can only really handle on the job unless you're freelance. You can only really get exposed to enterprise level things as far as user authentication and caching and build systems. You're only really going to get the best exposure to that on the job. And then once you get that, make sure you try to learn as much as you can in whatever job you're in, even if they say they don't care about it or they do just the bare minimum. Just really understand everything front to back as best as possible, whatever they allow you, uh, to have access to, learn it. And then, because that's what interviewers are going to ask for these higher level things, how much did you do in each part? Okay, you built this, but how does this work with that? Really understanding the full picture to connect the pieces is what's going to help you move up to that next level.
Yeah, that's really good.
Okay.
Uh,
So it's
yeah.
more about logic and like knowing one language, it's more about logic, how thing works and like how front end works with back end, right?
Yes, I would say it's more important. It's most important as far as understanding, uh, just having that deep knowledge in a specific area. So yeah, one or two languages depending on the stack you want to use. Uh, if you have a preferred framework within that stack, just really learn that, because that's what a company's going to use to be like, oh, if he knows this really well, then he can easily learn this. So yeah, you really have to focus in on one thing, kind of become a specialist first, and then you can generalize later on and once you get on the job.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that's true. I had this one question,
So
like, what was that one
yeah, yeah,
thing
sure.
you wish you would have started at the beginning of your, learning process? But now you have started it late, or you started it late before, and you wish you would have started it earlier.
Something I started late that I wish I started earlier.
Yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Anything. Like,
Um,
what do you think?
oof. Like it could be like anything, like what, like a language, like a course, like.
Yeah, anything.
Hmm. Well, I wish I had started. There's so many answers to that, but for like, first of all, I wish I started coding earlier. Like now, you can take coding in high school as an elective. I wish I knew that coding was a thing in high school. I had no idea. I had no. I just knew I wanted to work in computers. I had no idea what actual computer jobs were available and what you did in them. I thought it was only. I thought programming was only for games. I didn't know programming was for like literally all the software in the world that we use. That would have been extremely helpful, and it might have saved me that college tuition. Um, as far as like once I learned coding, I wish I knew. I really wish I knew how to. Uh, I wish I knew the
you only
half of the
forgot
advice
like
I gave.
what. Yeah,
Like I wish I
Devin said
knew
lots
like
of game
to
basically.
focus. I wish I took my own advice and really focused on learning one thing really well because I kind of hopped around. I saw WordPress was a thing. I heard about it in college, and I was like, okay, so I'm gonna learn PHP. I learned PHP kind of well. And I learned some other frameworks because I was like, I never heard of these. I thought I needed to learn them. And then I learned JavaScript, which was important because I had to learn it. But I hopped around from like Angular 1, and then React became popular, and then I was kind of switching back and forth, and I didn't really learn them all that well. And then I went back to WordPress, and it was like I had a basic knowledge in all of these things, but I wasn't like advanced enough at any one to really get good and to really kind of stand out as like a hire, like from a hiring perspective. So I wish I had just focused on one. I like now I JavaScript is the most fun for me to use, so I focus now on JavaScript. Although I'm happy I have that WordPress background, but I would say just focus on one thing and get good at it before you start moving around. Unless you just absolutely can't stand coding in it, then feel free to move. But if you enjoy it, stick with it and get good at it, and then you can move around. And that's what helped me. I kind of focused in on WordPress in the beginning, learned a lot about it, um, and then learned enough to know, okay, I enjoy doing other things more with JavaScript, and then just really, really focused on learning JavaScript and React. And that React knowledge transferred into React job, and then that React knowledge also transferred into a Vue job, which I had never used before. And then I had to learn Vue.js, and then it was much easier because I was comparing everything to React instead of learning the same framework fundamentals twice and trying to figure out what's going on. And so that's why I say just get that deep knowledge in one thing first. It helps so much in kind of getting a skills transfer. And that's also not just programming. I'm like doing that to learn other languages too, as a side note. So really get that deep knowledge. And it's so much easier and so much faster to transfer it later.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
really
right.
great.
Yeah.
I feel everyone does this, trying to make sense. In between, even I was confused. Like I was focusing on JavaScript, but I started like I was enjoying it, but still I started, getting attracted towards Python. I slowly started Python, but again I was like, okay, I got confused. But as you said, okay, they on one place.
Okay, like that's what I was
Oh my
telling to you
goodness.
basically. Just stuck on one place, like stuck on first programming language, then learn that like till advanced level, just like create projects by yourself and then move to other if you want to. Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. 'Cause I was like that. I was first. I was it was PHP and then it was JavaScript. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that JavaScript and PHP had functions. How come I didn't know? Oh, they have loops too. Oh, they conditionals too. Like, so trying to learn everything so brand new twice. It was just like, oh, if I had just really gotten good once I learned JavaScript really well, then I was like, okay, all these languages have loops and functions or methods. They all have conditionals. They all have iterables. They all have some version of this function. So it went from how do I loop over something to how do I do this exact thing in this different language, and it's much easier. And it also helps if you weren't like me and you were distracted by like, do I need to learn Ruby? Do I need to learn Python and PHP and all over the place?
Yeah, it is actually easier to learn a one language than switch to other language. It becomes easier to learn new language after you know one.
Exactly. It's because programming is the same. They all have the same fundamentals in certain
Yeah.
areas. So once you get to that language, you just look for those same fundamentals. It's a language for a reason. It's the same thing with learning a real life language. You're comparing everything to the language you already speak. It,
Hmm.
it's
That's
you're comparing the grammar. You're finding the origins of things to help you transfer as much knowledge you have into that new language. Oh, this word is exactly like this word in English. It's just
mm,
a different accent here or there. Same thing with like coding. Oh, these two languages handle loops the same. There's just a small difference in syntax that I have to Google every once in a while until I remember it.
yeah. Like I think coding is
Yes.
more about googling or searching for stuff. I think so.
Try to.
Oh, Google is my senior dev. Learn how to Google. That's like the biggest thing I would teach students because like especially at the beginning because I legit didn't know the answers. Like I would tell people I don't know the answer to the question you're asking right now, but I know how to find out, and I would show sorry show how to Google search what they're looking for, resources to find out everything they need. Um, Kind of being self sufficient because that's what you're going to do on the job. You're for the most part going to be self sufficient, looking for answers on your own, unless it's something really, really company specific, which you will come across. And that's the case, your Googling will help you with that too, because you can tell everybody what you've already tried, and they get much easier to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
is it like can we use Google or Stack Overflow in our job, or like they will notice you like he's using Google. You can't use that for searching
I
some
mean,
code in.
they won't let you use it on the interview, obviously, but on the job, everybody everybody has like five tabs open at least with some Google question and some Stack Overflow page. If I turned on my work laptop right now, I'd probably have at least one Stack Overflow tab open for something that I needed to figure out, and at least one Google like thing I found on Google for how to work with X, Y, and Z. You're always going to need it. You're always going to use it. Eventually, you maybe get to the point where it's like you have to create your own answers, and maybe you'll post it on Stack Overflow to get back. That's when you really know you've become the senior dev.
Right. Right.
Oh, everybody's going off camera. Like, is everybody okay?
Even Darshan is off. And yeah, like I had this one thing. Like now you're a full stack dev at PayPal. Like someone who wants to pursue the career you have, like, what advice would you give he him or her? so that they can move properly ahead. Like from where they should begin and what should their end point be.
Hmm. Someone one stage where I have uh what I recommend as far as I'm starting with. I would start with um first of all I would start with finding something you enjoy learning about, period. It could be literally anything coding related. Find something that you're interested in first. And that passion will take you a long way, through all the roadblocks that you'll come across, all the mental blocks that you kind of can't overcome because programming is so new and it's difficult. Make sure you're working on something you're passionate about. Have that kind of in your mind, even if it's money, whatever, like whatever you're passionate about. Just have that uh, in your mind. The second thing I would say, as far as like getting started to really be successful, um, find help early on. Early on, I didn't really ask for help. I wasn't really on like uh, community forums or boards or um, Slack or any kind of Discord, or I don't even know if Discord was a thing then, or any of these channels. Like I didn't go to meetups for a while. Like these community events help so much in terms of like one, just exposure to things that you never had any idea about, and having people to ask questions to bounce ideas off of, to see people that were in your position, because no one is born a coding genius. It's hard to believe, I know, but no one's born a coding genius. Everybody started off where you are as a beginner. So the more people you meet like that, the more inspired you will be, and also the more help you'll have, because developers are more generous, with their time and their knowledge than you think. Open source code is a great example of that. Like people just giving stuff away for free for you to use to help you, do your job, like with no
Yeah.
expectation. Like the community is amazing. So really take advantage of that. Lean into that. Go to all the meetups that you can, that are in the language you want or the field you want to be in, or discords, join hackathons. um, if you learn a decent amount in any one thing, volunteer to speak at one. Even if you are just a beginner or intermediate, there's always something you can teach, there's always something you can learn. So really get involved with the community heavy. And the third thing, if I had to say one, is the same way you don't hop around different languages. Uh, uh, don't hop around different tutorials either. Tutorial hell is a thing. Uh, tutorial purgatory, whatever you want to call it. You can easily get stuck hopping to different tutorials, learning the same thing in different ways. Um, Tutorials are great. Use them, add them to your portfolio, but then build on top of them. Don't just build it and then leave, because the more projects you build, the more you find out that uh, they all kind of use the same fundamental structure, as far as how the front end talks to the back end and how things interact with each other. um, you you would be better served to take that one project. If they're not, you can build a couple projects, you can do 2 or 3 or 5 tutorials, but make sure they're in different things. And you'd be better served to take those small projects and build on top of them, and it will look much better on your portfolio than doing every YouTube tutorial that has ever been known to man, and then the recruiter or the hiring manager or the senior dev looks at your portfolio and it looks like YouTube.com. Like they can tell if you get to the point where you're like interviewing with actual developers, they can tell what's just tutorial code and like what you actually worked on. And
Yeah.
the more you can think about how it was built versus I just followed along, the better. So it's really important to develop that, I think, on my own knowledge rather than I can follow along really well, but if someone else hasn't already done it, I don't know what to do.
Hmm. Yeah. That's hello.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, am I audible?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
audible.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I had this
Yeah,
thinking,
yeah,
like, why were you influenced to, move towards this coding or programmer as a programmer, the full stack developer? Like, there were a lot of options, right? You had moon stack, you had medium stack, but why did you choose as a full stack web developer at this one?
Uh, why did I choose it? It chose me, man. It chose me. Um, that and it pays more. But no, I mean I started off front end. It just seemed easier. Well, it was easier at the time, and you get instant feedback. You change this, you see it. You change that, you visibly see it. You get that. You don't really get that instant feedback with back end. Yeah, there's a whole foundation of things you have to create before you can start actually like seeing how things connect with each other. Whereas if I say font color blue, you know, and I have an H1 tag, I've already started. I'm already halfway there. So for me, it was much easier starting off in the front end. But why I moved into full stack was, or eventually was, one, I'm just curious by nature, which helps with the job. And so I always wanted to know how this works, but how does this work? And how does this connect to that? And full stack, gives you that exposure to understand how everything works. And and it helps you as a front end and back end developer to know how the other side works. The more you know about both, it really does help you in terms of how you design things because you know how the other side lives. You know how the other side of whatever stack you're on has to interact with it. So it really helps with your design choices and and as far as what you're building, what you're creating, and also um, just choosing that is obviously harder, and you really should focus on one stack to a decent amount of mastery. Like one of the I would say mentors, Raymond Gann, would talk about you would have to work in a stack at least 2 years before you'd be considered good at that stack and try to move to another stack. So you have to be good front end for at least 2 years before you can work in the back end, and you'd have to be working in the back end like professionally at least 2 years before you can be considered full stack. And to a certain extent, that's true because when you learn these skills front end and back end, you understand how they work, but you don't necessarily know how to build them. You know how they exist, but you don't necessarily know how to code them. And you know, 2 years in the front end, I knew okay, not just how this was built, but also how to build it myself. And the back end, same thing. Creating APIs
Yeah,
and MVC frameworks and these different kind of methodologies. I started to learn. Okay, this is how things actually work. When I create login, I need to do this. This is how data gets submitted. This is how it gets stored. This is how it gets pulled. This is how it gets cached. Like you actually understand the process. And when you do that, those developers are usually more valuable at companies because a small company can only afford to hire so many people, so they would rather have full stack. And a large company, uh, they can afford to hire more people, but the people who move up and become managers and project managers and senior devs, the ones leading these meetings, are full stack. They have to know how everything works, even if they don't necessarily code it themselves anymore. They have to know how the front end works, how the back end works, how the caching works, how the database is structured. They have to know these things. So it's only going to be at the very least at a high level, even if they're not, if they can't go in and fix the code right then and there. So it's long term much more beneficial to become full stack, and that's what I found, and that's what I enjoy. The challenge of making it all work. But to become full stack, you have to know both stacks, and to know a stack, you have to use it for a while. So definitely try to figure out which one you enjoy more, and uh, really get good at that before trying to uh, move to the other side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So you started as a front end or a back end developer?
Yeah, that's really
I
true.
started
Like
as front end.
it wasn't really true thing
Okay.
basically.
Yeah,
Hello.
I started as front end and then used what I learned or my knowledge of the front end to kind of get into positions either at work or just on the side to figure out how the back end communicates with the front end. And, and but I started front end first, and that's what helped me to get those to get that knowledge. And then once I learned back end, it was much, and then it was just connecting the dots. Oh, this is what happens when I create this on the front end. This is what this is what my front end is actually doing when someone submits a form. This is, and I send it to this URL. This is what's actually going on in the back end, or
Okay.
this is
Devin,
what the
Devin.
back end is in this.
What?
Hmm?
Darshan
Darshan,
was
did you
saying
say?
something.
No, just a question like interrupt you in. Yeah. Like stack developers, what
Yeah.
backend for like building that blogs and your work.
Can
I'm
you
sorry. Could you
can you
repeat that?
text it in the
Your
chat?
voice is breaking actually.
Yeah, yes. Can you put it in the text, like the chat box?
Okay, I'm audible now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yes.
I'm audible now.
Yeah, audible.
yes.
Okay. So I was telling like Devin, like what you are using in PayPal as a full stack developer, like what tech stack like in the front.
Hmm. Basically, what
Uh,
technologies or programming languages
Yeah,
you're working in for PayPal?
Okay.
major.
So yes, in PayPal specifically, where I am in my stack, because a lot of JavaScript gets used in PayPal. A lot. What I'm using specifically is I use React on the front end. I use React.js, and that's where we build all of our components, all of our props, and we kind of build this library of different components in React. We also use TypeScript. We just started that for all of our new components. We use TypeScript and React. So we need that typing structure to know exactly what each component's process needs to take, at least for the newer systems. On the older systems, we use React, but we are using React prop types to kind of do the same thing that TypeScript is doing. Just it's just harder to implement on the older systems. Um, so Oh, and we're using Webpack to bundle all of this code and transpile it and uh, minify it and all of this for production. Uh, and transpiling it from ES6 to ES5 and all those things. So that's the front end side of things. As far as CSS, it's all custom. There's no frameworks for that. We uh, we code all of the styles from scratch using less actually. And if you're familiar with Sass, less is another CSS preprocessor. So I got to learn that as well. So as far as the backend, most of the backend is Node. There are some different frameworks in Node depending on our older systems. We're using Kraken JS, which is a superset of Express.js, and we're using that to control our routes, to control what happens when the URL hits a specific language. That's what we use to handle the caching and things like that. For newer projects, we tend to explore different things that they're small enough. Explore using exploring using Gatsby.js for this static content. Now we're looking into using Next.js as far as serving our static content in different languages and how that can interact with Contentful, which we use for our APIs and to create our APIs and different things like that. So it's a matter of really depending on the job, and we explore these different things. And the databases, they're older. Some are SQL, some are Mongo. Some APIs are, typical REST APIs. Other APIs we're using GraphQL. It's a lot of different things depending on, how old the system is and what they need to use it for. So it's a lot of different things. Like me on the component team, we're using Storybook a lot to demonstrate all these components we're building so that the non technical people who are designing these pages know what everything looks like and knows how they want the pages created so they can just drag and drop. It's a combination of a lot of different tools, and that's just the ones that I've been exposed to in the 6 months I've been working at. There are others, of course, for the iOS team and some of the other teams as well.
So how you collaborate on this such a big code base? Like you do on GitHub or any other thing like you have created in PayPal for the company only? Like how you collaborate with your teammates?
Um, a lot of collaboration. So like with a lot of large companies, you'll have a private GitHub repo, and that's where all of this code kind of lives. And at least how PayPal does it, it's a bunch of smaller repos that connect to each other and talk to each other. And then you'll have some companies like others I've worked previously where it's just like one huge repo and you just gotta get like subset access to subsets of it. So like for PayPal, there's a repo for where all these components are built, and then there's a repo for the back end that serves the pages, and then there's another repo uh, that contains all the content that's statically generated, and you basically link these together, both in production and on your computer. So like if I'm working on my computer, I'm building out a component. Okay, I build out this component in this repo and I test it, I code it, I create it, great. But now I need to test how it actually works, in on live. on the actual site. I need to see how the code looks in the wild. I need to make sure my component doesn't like mess up the styles of some other component, or vice versa. It doesn't get overridden. To do that, I would have to download this other repo on my computer, get that up and running, link the two. You can npm link, which comes in handy a lot, and you would configure it to be like, okay, instead of running this code from the server, I need you to link to my local computer and link to this specific repo. So when you're searching for something, search for it here, and then we connect those two. Then you can see, oh, okay, this kind of works, but this doesn't. And so it's a lot of connectivity. You need to understand how the different repos talk to each other, how they work, which repo does what, and then you kind of connect the two or three that you need to have them talk to each other to make sure that everything works smoothly.
Yeah. So is it safe to use a private GitHub repo? Like, can anyone like hack into that repo and steal the code that you're writing? Is it safe?
I mean, it's safer than GitHub itself usually, because it's your repo. Most companies will do this just because it's on their server. No one's necessarily looking for Microsoft or PayPal's specific like GitHub server and URL versus GitHub itself, and also it's a little bit more configurable and more manageable for what these companies need. They'll have their own build systems as far as like when they publish something to GitHub, they have their own needs for what happens when this code gets pushed to a specific branch, how it interacts with all these build systems, with their Jenkins, to build and bundle all these things, and Circle CI or anything else, and how it runs all these tests. It's easier to do that in most cases on your own private repo than to pay GitHub to manage all of it for you.
Yeah, that's true.
And plus, there's a whole bunch of other security stuff that goes into it, like VPNs and stuff. But yeah, it's usually safer.
Okay. Yeah, so
That's great,
it's total.
So
Like,
yeah,
Darshan,
that's
if you
nice. Now I think like we need to pack up basically.
what?
No,
Are you
like it
telling
was a
me? Are
really
you
great
asking?
session. Like Devin, they like how we get a job, basics to advance.
Mm.
So you froze there
Am I
for a
audible?
second. It sounds like you're trying to wrap it up, or
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so Darshan, what are you saying? Like, can you repeat? Your voice is breaking very much.
I'm audible now.
oh no, you froze. Everyone's freezing. Yes, you're audible now.
Um,
Okay, so I was saying like now basically we need to wrap up right now. Like Devin was like Devin told like how we get the job in PayPal. So it was really great session.
yeah,
Nice to meet you, Devin. Like with you.
yeah. It was a great session, man. Like,
Your journey was really
what
cool. Like you have
comment?
learned about programming, then you got a job.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really informative. Please appreciate that. Yes,
Okay,
Devin.
so
Bye, bro. Thanks for your time. Because here
okay,
is
bye,
early in
guys.
the morning.
Thank you.
Devin joined,
I
bro.
know
Bye, bye.
it's super early. I'm probably gonna sleep for another
Yes.
3 hours before I go to work. Thanks,
Actually,
everyone.
what is the time over there?
It is 6:30 right
He
now
just sleep for 3 hours.
in the morning.
do we like? Is there a holiday tomorrow? Like today?
Oh, okay.
What's
It's
yeah? Okay, sorry.
Friday. It's Friday right now, so I actually should probably check my calendar to see when my first meeting is. I'm assuming it's in 4 hours. Uh, it is in 4 hours, so I'm probably wake up and oh, I have no meetings today. Even better, I'm just gonna sleep. Heard it here first. I'm gonna just sleep
That's
as long as
nice.
I want, and then work in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That's great. You can
Okay,
sleep.
so yeah,
Like,
you
sorry
can
for
take
like
your sleep.
disturbing about your sleep.
Yep.
Oh man, but you guys woke me up now. You guys have so much energy, so I appreciate. I
Yes,
appreciate
yes,
this
bye, bro.
interview. It's been great.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you, man.
Bye bye.
Thanks, bro. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.